All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the policy track. My name is Jaysha Bray. I'm the Associate Administrator for International Affairs at NTIA, and I will be your MC today. We are very excited for the discussions, and for the folks who are not technical, like me, this is a chance to discuss some of the policy considerations. And when we were really designing this symposium, we struggled with putting together an agenda that would be accessible to policy and technical people. And so our solution was to have everyone together one day and then separate everyone today so that we could really dig a little deeper into the policy considerations and create some space to ask questions that some of the technical people probably know, but the chance to really explore some of the questions that policy people might have. And so for the agenda today, we're going to have a chance to hear directly from the Czechs about their development of the Prague proposals on telecommunications supplier diversity. We'll have a panel discussing the implementation of these Prague proposals and really dig into the role of governments to promote telecom supplier diversity. Now, we recognize that this effort to promote supplier diversity can and should be industry-led. So I'm particularly excited for the panel to talk about how industry and government can collaborate to promote supplier diversity. Then we'll divide into breakout groups to discuss elements of the Prague proposals in further detail. So I also know that we have a big day tomorrow, so looking ahead to that, I know many of you will be crossing state lines all the way to Wyoming, and I understand for many of you it'll be the first time visiting Wyoming, so that's particularly exciting, to join the visit to the brand new Open RAN Center for Integration and Deployment, which is operated by EcoStar and Dish Wireless. And this is a great opportunity for us to see Open RAN in action. So we'll have 2 buses arriving to the hotel at 8:30 for a prompt departure at 9 a.m. for this lab, and it'll take about 2 hours to get to Cheyenne. So a great chance to get to know a colleague on the bus and discuss the symposium and other details, or take a nap. And then we'll spend a few hours checking out the sites at the lab. We'll also be providing lunch. And then we'll plan to depart Cheyenne around 2 p.m. to return back to the hotel at 4 p.m. So my colleague, Kate Dimsdale, if you want to raise your hand or stand up, yes. She'll be sending around the confirmation email for everyone who signed up during the registration process. And in the meantime, please feel free to reach out to Kate with any questions. And so with no further ado, we'll move on to our agenda. And our first speaker is Peter Pacheco from MITRE, and he'll be stepping in for Andy, he'll be providing a summary from day one and providing more information about Open RAN. And be thinking of your questions as well, because this is an opportunity to really ask a technical expert some questions, and there's no such thing as a stupid question. So please feel free to give him your toughest questions, right, Peter? Yeah, so over to Peter. Thank you.
Thank you, Jaysha. I'm sure the first thought many of you have right now seeing me up here is like, who the hell is this guy? I am not Andy, who was the person who originally slated to speak here. But I work with Andy, so I'm a behind-the-scenes guy. I do support a lot of activity with U.S. government as it leads in ORAN and its engagements with foreign governments, and how do we get participation with other countries to engage and leverage ORAN technology. So looking back on yesterday, I think the first thing is to thank NTIA ITS for putting together an event like this. The amount of work that's involved with gathering this many people and being so well organized is impressive. So job well done on day one. Yesterday you had some very important people from the U.S. government kicking off. Today you have me. But nonetheless, it goes to show you how important the ORAN technology is and what are the possibilities of it, that you have such important people involved. I think really there's some key outtakes from yesterday. One was you had operators talking about how they view ORAN. And I think to appreciate what is it that they were saying, you need to sort of think back to how operators operated, if you will, when it came to telecom networks. Operators would build out their networks. When you think of a telecom network, you can really break it up into two parts. There's what they call the core network, and then there's the radio access network. Operators would build that out, and it was very closed in the sense that, there was one or two vendors that they would establish contracts with to build out their networks. And there was a deep leaning or reliance on the vendors to operate and maintain that network. And because to make that easy for the vendors had a lot of control in terms of what the products looked like, what their features and capabilities were. Go from that to operators sitting here and now talking about having a lab that is similar to the environment by which their network operates in, and enable vendors to come in with a solution for the RAN or for the core, to be able to drop that in and test their solution within that operator's network, not their commercial network, but something similar, is just unheard of. That never existed before. And that is what ORAN is enabling for these operators. If you also think about, there's always been government involvement in telecommunications. Yesterday, you saw a panel of people from different governments engaging in different opportunities, collaborating with one another, talking to one another, sharing lessons learned from one another, discussing what they think are key investments, and perhaps leveraging each other's investments. It was a small panel. The hope is that that will grow, that you have other countries also participating in that, and I think that's why we have a diverse representation of different governments here, is that there's an interest. And I think that if all governments can come together and participate in an effort like that, that you'll enable very unique new opportunities that ORAN can support. There was talk about testing yesterday. Testing is really, really important, because when you think about what I said earlier in regards to the way operators built networks, there was a reliance on the vendors. The vendors did testing on their own, and then they would go ahead, establish a contract, take their solutions, deploy it in an operator's network. Today, that's all changed. Testing, the ORAN radio has been broken up into pieces, and there's been new capabilities added into the radio to make it more flexible. That brings in complexity. It brings different knobs that you can now turn to make the radio unique to your network. For every variation, you have to test that. So testing has become extremely complex in terms of you have to test each of the individual components in the radio, then you have to connect them all together, you have to test that, and then you have to test the radio connected to the core network to give you an overall assessment of how well your network can perform. So it's important that there be discussions on testing and how is it that you go about doing that. And what's really important is that testing be consistent no matter where it is that you do it and who's doing it. So it's good to hear that people are making progress in that direction. Finally, in regards to yesterday, I thought was really impressive was the big dating scene at the end. At least that's how some refer to it. But it was the number of people, a number of companies that are involved in ORAN in one way or another. And you got to see all the different things that people are doing to either enable the technology, to promote it. And when you've got that much momentum behind it, you have to feel excited about what ORAN is and where it is that it's going. So what about today? Jaysha mentioned security. I work at MITRE. Security is really, really important to us. When you think of security, people talk about security supply chain. I want to try and simplify this, why it's really important. Governments across the globe are concerned about any data network and the threats associated with operating a network. The data you have going through there and who wants access into that data, and what attacks are they going to employ on your network to get into your network to be able to access that data, whatever that may be. I kind of view that as that is your outside threat. Given that when you build out a network and vendors play a key role in building out that network, and even after it's built, they're still engaged. The question then becomes, what is the threat with that? Do you trust who those vendors are? Do you trust what it is that they're doing in their network? It varies across operators. It varies amongst operators across the globe in terms of how they manage their network. Operators own a part of that. The vendors own a part of that. In some cases, vendors can go in and they can access pretty much anything on that network, whether it be a functional component, a piece of software, a piece of hardware, but they can also access the data that goes over that network. So the question becomes, do you trust who those vendors are that have that level of access? I call that the insider threat. Another thing to think about is capacity building. I support the State Department on various engagements with different countries. For the most part, it's been in South America. What I have learned is that those operators, those governments, face different challenges than what the U.S. faces. And in some cases, it comes down to the ability to be able to evolve their networks. And it comes back to the model, if you will, in terms of how vendors provide their solutions. Again, think of a network. You got a vendor that has their solutions working in that network. If you want to evolve to the next generation, you have to work with that vendor to allow you to do that, or you may have to incur some cost to then move towards a different vendor. ORAN can change that. ORAN, you can have a network that is a platform. Think of it as a bunch of computers, a bunch of servers, and a bunch of switches. And what you install on top of that will make up what your radio network will look like. So now it becomes software. It's kind of like owning a computer. There aren't many options, but I may be using a piece of software on my computer. I don't like it. I can get rid of it. I can go buy a different piece of software from a different vendor, install it, and use that instead. Makes it a lot easier. It's hard for me to hear when I engage with operators in foreign countries and they say, we just don't have the financial resources. Our customer base just does not have the dollars, if you will, to give us a revenue stream that we can reinvest back into the network to be able to evolve it to a different technology. Let's simplify that. Let's make it easier going forward for them to be able to do that. And ORAN has a place for that. In regards to what is next for ORAN, you heard a lot about testing, and operators have pieces of ORAN installed in their network. They're trialing with it. I think it's really important to understand what is ORAN because it gets misused a lot. So what happened in telecommunications, there's an organization, standards organization, 3GPP, that defines what is a 5G radio look like? What are the functions in it? And they defined 3 of them. And to keep it simple, It's a DU, a CU, and an RU. We're not going to get into what each one does here, but just think of that. CU, DU, RU, 3 pieces. The ORAN Alliance came in and said, hey, we can do more. Let's change one of the interfaces so that it's a little bit harder for the vendors to make it proprietary, so that you have to use the vendor solution and because it won't work with others. And they also said, let's put a platform in there that we can install applications so that we can really customize what a radio looks like. That platform is what they refer to as the Radio Intelligence Controller. The next step for ORAN, so operators are testing CUs, DUs, and RUs. They're starting to explore the Radio Intelligence Controller and what that brings. Next step for ORAN, from my perspective as a technology guy, is where the innovation and the use cases. What types of apps, what can those apps do that are installed on that radio that opens up new opportunities, opens up new verticals, allows you to address challenges that you weren't able to address before. On Monday, prior to the symposium, there was an event here where we had some representatives from other countries, and in particular, there was someone from Kenya. And he talked about how in his country, people can't afford to buy new phones. So if you upgrade the radio to 4G to 5G, their phone might not work. And it's really difficult for those people to be able to go ahead and acquire a new phone. If you think about in places like Kenya, coverage is an issue because the operators don't see the ROI to be able to expand their network into areas where, of underserved coverage. ORAN, developing a killer app, I call it a killer app, that will enable operators to extend coverage. I don't know if that's possible, by the way, but the point here is that if you enable innovation and allow people to stop building these different use cases to tackle challenges like that, like is there a way to be able to roll out a 5G radio, but if someone's got an old phone, you're still able to provide connectivity? Is there a way to be able to use ORAN to deploy radios that don't necessarily have to be on a tower with a fiber cable connected to it, because there's an expense associated with doing that? So can people think of different ways by which you can deploy networks? And then think of data. Everyone knows what Google has done in terms of, when it comes to data, what happens when you have data. The same is going to be the case when you think of a radio and all the traffic that goes through that radio. What does that mean? What are the possibilities there? Opportunity for innovation. And lastly, another part I think is going to be a topic of discussion, I think an important one, is the ORAN specifications and standards. I think it's important to monitor what's going on there. What the key thing is that the spirit of ORAN continues on, that it continues to be open, it continues to promote interoperability. Security is important. One of my roles within the ORAN Alliance was that, when the ORAN Alliance released specifications, it defined the radio. Security was sort of an afterthought. And then they quickly organized and formed a security focus group to then go back and secure a lot of the different functions and interfaces for an ORAN radio. And then I think it's also important that as you develop specifications, you work towards performance parity. That was talked about yesterday. You don't want to define specifications that make an ORAN radio perform less than or worse than what traditional radios are able to do. And then lastly, and I touched on this, you want to make sure that specifications enable innovation. I think that's key. I'm not sure how much time I got left, but I'll wrap this up with 3 final thoughts. And why 3? Because when I sit in the audience, that's what everybody else does. They use the number 3. First one, And this applies, I think, to policymakers. And also, if I was on the other side, I think I'd deliver the same 3 bullets. The first one is, keep thinking outside the box. The example I give there is the one I touched on earlier. You don't always need a tower and a fiber cable. The second one, ORAN is no longer an infant. It was 2-3 years ago, but now it's a child. Enable it to continue growing. There's still some maturity issues with it. We just got to keep enabling that and don't get in the way. As ORAN impacts, the third bullet, as ORAN impacts spreads across the globe into many verticals, touching many lives, be sure it is trustworthy. Because I do believe ORAN will enable new use cases, new opportunities that operators are going to look at and say, there's a money-making opportunity for me. It's going to enhance lives, whether it be it's bringing new connectivity to people who've never had connectivity before. You want to make sure that as that all grows, that people can trust it. And that's all I got for you. Sure. My favorite part, questions.
If anyone has questions, please go to the mic. Now's your chance. You covered it all? All right, thank you.
Sure.
All right, moving right along. We will now have a virtual presentation. We'll be hearing from Roman Paka, the Chief Advisor to the Director of the Czech Republic's Cyber and Information Security Agency. He asked me to convey that he's very sorry he couldn't be with us all here in Colorado, but is very happy to be included in the program. And he'll be talking about the Czech Republic's really pivotal work to develop both the Prague proposals on 5G security and the Prague proposals on telecom supplier diversity. And so we will now hear from Mr. Paka.
Greetings from Prague, and thank you, Assistant Secretary Alan Davidson and Associate Administrator Jay Chabray, along with your international team, for the opportunity to join the International Open RAN Symposium today, at least virtually. Let me start with a story that began 6 years ago, in 2018, when the world was just beginning to grasp the magnitude of the challenges ahead in the realm of telecommunication security. It was a time of shifting geopolitics, where security wasn't just a matter of physical borders, but of invisible ones, the networks that connect us all. In the Czech Republic, we recognized this early on. We made an unprecedented decision at the time to issue a public warning about 2 Chinese suppliers, Huawei and ZTE, being potential risks to our critical infrastructure. This was a bold and controversial step. We are among the first in the European Union to take such action, but it was more than just a warning. It was the first chapter in our journey toward building secure, resilient, next-generation networks. This decision laid the groundwork for what would be soon become the Prague proposals on 5G security, launched during the Prague 5G Security Conference in May 2019. These proposals weren't just recommendations, they were a wake-up call. They introduced a concept that would reshape global thinking about telecommunications, the need for trusted suppliers, and the holistic assessment of both technical and non-technical risks in the deployment of 5G networks. At the time, the risks of foreign involvement in critical infrastructure were just beginning to make headlines. But the Prague proposals turned the abstract into something concrete. They opened the door to a larger and more urgent global discussion about the future of network security. Yet, as we moved forward, we quickly realized that security alone wasn't enough. Innovation and cooperation had to be our guiding principles. In 2021, we introduced a second set of Prague proposals, this time focused on telecommunications supplier diversity. You may ask why? Well, because in a world where dependency on a single supplier can expose us to untold risks, diversification is essential. It's a key to reducing vulnerabilities, mitigating risks, and building a more sustainable, resilient supply chain. Promoting open and interoperable networks is not just a technical solution. It's an invitation for collaboration. Governments, industries, and academia must work hand in hand to foster competitiveness and innovation. That's why I'm proud to share that we recently established an Open RAN working group under our National 5G Alliance. This platform, bringing together government, industry, and academia, is tasked with developing our national position on Open RAN. We've also seen growing interest from industry players like Mavenir in pioneering Open RAN case studies right here in the Czech Republic, particularly in Brno, where my agency is based. As I reflect on the journey we've taken, I realize that what started as early efforts in Prague has now echoed across the world. The Prague proposals, launched in the heart of Central Europe, have shaped global telecommunications policy discussion. They have become a cornerstone of international cooperation, laying the foundation for collaboration within Quad, G7, and influencing the EU 5G security toolbox. But our work doesn't stop here. The Prague proposals on vendor diversification have been endorsed by a broad coalition of like-minded governments from the United States and the United Kingdom to Japan, Australia, India, Taiwan, and even Costa Rica. This global embrace highlights how critical these ideas have become in shaping the future of telecommunications security. But the success of our next generation networks won't be determined by policies alone. It will be defined by our ability to collaborate. Governments, industry leaders, academics, we are all stakeholders, and we must work together, inspired by the spirit of Prague proposals. We need to forge new technical partnerships, attract private investment in Open RAN, and develop innovative solutions together. As we meet here today, we cannot ignore the reality unfolding in the world around us. The ongoing war in Ukraine serves as a reminder of the fragility of our interconnected systems. It underscores the critical importance of transatlantic cooperation. The security of our next generation network is not just about connectivity. It's about the security and prosperity of our shared future. Thank you for your attention, and I wish you all productive discussions ahead.
So that is a perfect kickoff to our next panel, and I will invite the panelists up to the stage. As was mentioned, the Prague proposals on telecom supplier diversity, they were launched almost 3 years ago. And since then, we've had 10 countries endorse them. And this will be an opportunity to hear from those countries, those policymakers who have endorsed them, and we'll hear about their work to implement them. So no further ado, I will invite the panel to the stage, moderated by my colleague, Corey.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on day 2 of our policy track. And a virtual thank you to our colleagues in the Czech Republic for their introductory remarks on the Prague proposals on 5G security and telecommunications biodiversity. So like Jasha had mentioned, I'm Corey Shermer. I work in the Office of International Affairs at NTIA, and I will be your moderator today. And I'm Humbled to be joined by four leading colleagues working on Open RAN and telecommunications supplier diversity. And like the panel is called, it's the implementation of the PROG proposals. So really what we're trying to focus on today is actions that are being done in real-world scenarios outside of just the two-page PROG proposals. We really want to touch on what governments and industry in each country and worldwide are doing to really further the needle on Open RAN development and telecommunications supplier diversity. And I think one of the crucial points that our colleague from the Czech Republic highlighted is that a lot of the success of these next generation networks are not just determined by policies, but also determined by the ability of our governments to collaborate and forge new technical partnerships on Open RAN and supplier diversity. So starting off a little bit on the PROG proposals on telecommunications supplier diversity, it was the first set of shared international principles that really defined the role that we as policymakers have in advancing supply chain diversity in telecommunications, including through approaches like Open RAN. So just to start off, I'm going to give each colleague on the panel an opportunity to introduce themselves or reintroduce themselves, talk about their role and its relation to Open RAN or supplier diversity writ large. So I'm happy to start going down the line. So I'll start with my colleague Matt from Canada.
Hello, everybody. Matthew Potter. So I'm a senior policy analyst working on telecom resilience and security for the Canadian Department of Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada, or ISED. As a quick overview for those who aren't familiar, ISED has a rather large mandate. We work across the entire Canadian economy to foster innovation, to build a fair, efficient and competitive marketplace, and to grow our share of global trade. ISED has a number of responsibilities for telecommunications, including oversight of our Telecom and Radiocom Acts. We also regulate spectrum and telecom equipment, and we're tasked with working with our sector stakeholders to increase the security and resilience of our networks. In terms of my specific unit, we are comprised of a mix of technical experts and policy analysts. I'm on the policy side. And we have connections to Open RAN and supply chain diversification through a few activities, and I'll just kind of go over them quickly. We're involved in standards development, and we're also monitoring the activities of industry-led initiatives. We maintain close engagement with our telecom sector stakeholders, again, primarily working on security and resilience. We are currently supporting the modernization of our legislative frameworks to bring security to the forefront and ensure that government has the tools to address any threat to our telecom system, including those originating from our supply chains. And we also finally work closely with our colleagues working in innovation and R&D to fund and support telecom projects domestically. So our efforts to more proactively engage with Open RAN are ongoing. We've increasingly allocated both resources and time towards this, but frankly, we're still coming at it from perhaps a bit behind some of my colleagues at the table here. So we're very happy to be here today. Thank you to ITS and the NTIA for having us. And we really look forward to speaking with you all and to kind of taking this as a learning opportunity. If you have any very technical questions, then I will point you to my colleague Vu, who will be next door, but otherwise happy to chat at any time. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. And moving over to the first of our Toms on the panel, Dr. Tom Rundo.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, good. So yeah, I'm Tom Rondo. I am the Principal Director for Future Generation Wireless Technologies, or what we just call Future G. So anything 5G, advanced, 6G, beyond, all those things fall under my purview at the U.S. Department of Defense. I work for the Undersecretary of Defense for Research and Engineering. So for one thing, I am an interloper here. I do have a technical background, and I am masquerading as a policy person for the current role. So hopefully we'll be able to explain to you some of the things we've been working on and accomplishing in the office from a technical execution perspective, but how that's helping us meet the goals of Open RAN deployment and rollouts. So a lot of people ask us, why is the DoD, US DoD, so involved in this? As you all probably know, we have a fairly worldwide presence from the United States for our peacekeeping and our warfighting missions, and we really require secure communications, trusted infrastructure to do that work from wherever we find ourselves executing our missions throughout the world. So making sure that information and telecommunications, that infrastructure provides that security and that assurance to reliable information wherever we are is critical to us. So I get to work in a really interesting intersection of our traditional national security approaches, but also our national economic security as we engage with commercial industry in ways that the United States Department of Defense has not done as much of in the past. So it opens up to interesting conversations, new relationships that we have to build, international collaboration and partnerships to make sure that all of these pieces can come together, and that the values that we've been espousing from the original PROG proposals into the second, the one on supplier diversification, all of those things really come together to meet those needs, and we're really happy to be a part of this. So thank you for having us. Thank you for hosting this, and we'll talk more about specifics when we get to the questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And then moving forward to our colleagues from ITRI in Taiwan, Tiffany Lin.
Thank you, Corey. Okay, can I move up a little bit? So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Tiffany Lin from ITRI. So, ITRI is based in Taiwan. The full name is Industrial Technology Research Institute, commonly known as ITRI or ITRI, like I said. Founded in 1973, ITRI was tasked as a leading research and development institute for both advanced research and also applied research. So some of our famous spin-offs include, for instance, TSMC as a result of the incubation done within ITRI. Now, you're probably wondering what is an R&D institute sitting here in this policy panel. And this is because oftentimes ITRI is tasked with the mission to act as think tanks for the Taiwanese government. So what happens is that within ITRI, we have numerous labs to focus on the various verticals. For instance, we have one that's dedicated to the information and communication technologies. And then we were tasked by the Ministry of Economic Affairs in Taiwan to oversee the Open RAN development and movement within Taiwan. So this is where our office, my office, comes into play, because we are delegated as the project office that focuses on communications industry development for Taiwan. So in short, anything that comes with Open RAN within Taiwan, you can come to our office, because we not only provide policy support, we're also like the one-stop contact window between our government and our industry. And I'm very glad to see we have some of our Taiwanese representatives sitting within this conference room with me to show some support, I hope. But it is for that reason that we were really delighted to be invited by Jaysha and her team to be able to sit on this panel and to talk about some of the real examples, implementations that we've been doing. I'll leave it at that, and I look forward to discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Tiffany. And then last but not least, Tom from the United Kingdom.
Thanks, Corey. And good to see you all again. And misfortune of hearing me speak 2 days in a row. So I'm from the UK's Department for Science, Innovation and Tech. We're actually quite a new department. We only formed about 18 months ago. The idea of bringing together all of the various technically bits of the government machine, which was kind of scattered around a few other departments, bring it all into one place, and have a hub there for engineering, physical sciences, life sciences, whatever it is, all in one place. It's been a really big success so far. We've done a load of really good work, and being able to have all those teams in one place, kind of sitting in the same office and things, has really helped us find those areas of convergence and things. In terms of Open RAN specifically, I lead the telecoms R&D team. So Open RAN's obviously been a big part of that for us over the past few years. We've spent about 250 million on R&D projects since 2020, including Sonic Labs, who you may have heard speak yesterday. And yeah, we've been working with the guys all here across and many others on the Open RAN agenda over the last few years. So yeah, really keen for the rest of the discussion. That's great.
Perfect. Thank you. So as you can see, a very broad coalition of like-minded governments, just like the PROG proposals spell out. So again, this panel is really focusing on providing concrete examples of how each government is supporting Open RAN and supplier diversity, not only from policy, technical, and industrial perspectives. So we do have a good range of colleagues up here. So as mentioned, we heard from our Czech colleagues that actual engagement is important to really pushing forward policies that further Open RAN and telecom supplier diversity. So I'm going to start out with our first question, giving each panelist an opportunity to share key examples of their engagement in supporting the adoption of and development and promotion of Open RAN and supply chain diversification. And then on top of that, really identifying their underlying philosophy or interests in pursuing these activities. So this is open to all panelists. Perhaps we can start with Dr. Rondeau and then move forward.
Yeah, thanks. This is great. So my office, if you've been tracking any of it, when we kicked off about 2020, working between the U.S. Department of Defense and Congress, started to put a lot of money towards the implementation of 5G and the experimentation of how 5G meets national security needs. So in that, we started funding a number of experiments where we were putting down 5G test beds across many U.S. Military facilities and exploring what they can do from a dual use perspective, things that have both incentives to the DoD because it's solving mission needs of ours, but also has incentives to commercial industry because we are offsetting risk in the development of new technologies and new vertical areas of technology integration that 5G promises. So that's our starting point. And a number of those were using the traditional RANs, but we really were trying to push into the Open RAN work and promoting that as much as possible. Of course, that was, a number of years ago. So as things have matured, and you heard Peter say, a couple of years ago it was a baby, now it's maturing into a child. So as we're evolving in all of our experimentation and as we're rolling out new projects and new ideas, everything is predicated on Open RAN unless you give us the most compelling reason that it can't be. We've yet to see one of those that actually makes sense to us. So we have a handful of different approaches here that we can take on how 5G meets these mission needs. You've got 5G, future G as the core technology of future telecommunications around the world. So we want to be engaging in the public MNOs, public mobile network operator space. For that one, we are in the process now of contracting a new effort where out of Fort Bliss in Texas, we are going to create one of the first public networks with a tier one telecommunications provider in the United States to provide access on an Open RAN, financially Open RAN network. I can't say too much more about the details of that until the contracts are settled in the next few months, but that will be an exciting proof of concept within the U.S. for us to understand that, yes, it's possible to run a public MNO based on a truly a full Open RAN stack. So that's going to give us a lot of insights into the possibilities here, into the future of our engagements with the telecommunications industry at large, and understand better how these work within public telecommunications networks. The other aspect, or another aspect of this, is the private networks. And that's been exciting for us from the 5G perspective of how we are more easily able to build and deploy private 5G networks. The one that I'll talk about related to this topic is our Naval Air Station at Whidbey Island. So Whidbey Island has a big Navy presence outside of Seattle in the state of Washington. And we've deployed with Dish Networks and Hughes Networks a Open RAN compliant private network to run operations on the airfields out there. Been a huge success in order to tie different pieces of our private needs for communications, command and control across and management of assets and resupply systems across a broad network. We've actually tied that into some of our bases down in Hawaii, where we can now share the network cores and share access to it. And finally, we have the use of private 5G networks, not in just a standalone and static location, but how do we bring those to the field with us? So we always say in our office, traditional military operations, if you need a tank to cross a river and there's a bridge that supports that tank, we'll use the bridge. If we don't have a bridge to support that tank, we build our own bridges. Similarly with wireless infrastructure, we need to be able to build our own infrastructure in times that we need it. So out of our Camp Pendleton work out in California, we've been building deployable 5G networks for the Marine Corps for the Expeditionary Advanced Base Operations. That's a core concept of how the Marine Corps is growing into the next generation of the fighting force that they are. So that puts together public MNOs, private networks, and deployable private networks that meet different needs of the DoD, all based on Open RAN and all showing the successful use of this technology to create actual, capable, secure systems that meet our needs. So that's where we come into this one, where we really have some concrete evidence.
Perfect. And thank you so much. I think it's really important, the work that DoD is doing, and it really gets to the target, or to the heart of some of the ideas and the proposals of supporting technical measures as well as R&D and pilot initiatives to really show that Open RAN can work in a real life setting. I'll turn that question now over to Tiffany, and then Tom, and then Matt.
Okay, so I would like to share with you the journey that Taiwan has actually taken that allows us to be here today. So as a matter of fact, with the movement, we call it a movement of Open RAN because it's actually an evolution. We understood that it possessed a humongous opportunity for the vendor ecosystem in Taiwan. Reason being, we've been known for really excellent manufacturing capabilities. In the past, we were like the trusted partners to a lot of the global suppliers already. With the coming of Open RAN, it means that it will allow new vendors to come into the market, smaller vendors, which opens the doors to a lot of our companies within Taiwan. That's one thing. So recognizing that it will not only help the vendors to grow, but also to help operators to break like the vendor lock-in situation, our government started this initiative as well. I would say in 2020, actually maybe like 2019 or so, we were planning for it. In 2020, with the resources from the Ministry of Economic Affairs, IORS was tasked to establish the first carrier-grade end-to-end open networking lab, the first one in Taiwan. So the idea was realizing that interoperability is the first challenge that we need to tackle. We want to make sure we have one functional lab within Taiwan that allows our massive vendor ecosystem to take advantage of. They don't need to go somewhere else. They don't need to build their own. And obviously the operators, they have their businesses to take care of. So allow the government to put in resources firsthand to do that. With that base, we also realized that Open RAN is something that we cannot do on our own, obviously. It takes a village. Global partnership is important. And this is when we reached out to global standard bodies or industry alliances. And here I would like to draw the example of Telecom Infra Project as an instance, because 2020, we established that carrier-grade end-to-end Open Networking Lab, and then in 2021, we became the first TIP community lab in Taiwan, allowing us to use the test cases provided by the MNOs, the members within TIP. We are able to use those test cases and then to validate the mature products provided by our vendors. And we don't just open to vendors in Taiwan, because we do have instances of other products, say like open Wi-Fi, disaggregated cell site gateways, so on and so forth, which will actually involve global partners to come together. So on that base, with the government resources to support this lab, we're able to build partnerships with folks over here, because we're able to reach out to, for instance, Digital Catapult Sonic Labs from the UK, or like the I-14Y lab supported by the BMDV in Germany, also NTI-ITS on shared goals to promote Open RAN altogether. All right, so that's the backstory. Now, when it comes to development, that's what the government is doing. That will be building a lab that's open to all vendors within Taiwan, allowing you to validate your products against global MNOs requirements. That's one thing. Another thing is that we also communicate with our very own telecom operators within Taiwan to understand their needs and their bottlenecks, what's stopping them from adopting Open RAN. So a lot of meetings are held. We ask them questions, want to try to bridge that gap. Okay, that. And then when it comes to adoption of Open RAN, actually yesterday our colleagues from Zhonghua Telecom mentioned that there are numerous private networks trials within Taiwan, throughout Taiwan actually, funded by the Taiwanese government, allowing, say, like our MNOs to use Open RAN products to test the parity, to see if it's working. As of right now, we only have trials for the private networks so far, but we're hoping to see some change maybe in the near future, hopefully, because we do realize that with Open RAN, eventually we want to supply them to the public network, but then having opportunities to trial that will be important. So that's something that we are working on right now. It could be within Taiwan, it could be with partners outside of Taiwan, we don't know yet, but this is a direction that our government is trying to support that. And lastly, well, promotion. So in terms of Open RAN, as you know, we have a massive vendor ecosystem. We want to try to bridge them to the global partners. So basically we do it, well, two ways. First and foremost, we take our vendors out to the global marketplace. So basically trade shows and whatnot, Taiwan Pavilion, we gather our vendors to go there to showcase the capabilities of Taiwanese vendors. Or we invite international delegations, decision makers in the Open RAN ecosystem to come to Taiwan. And here I'll draw the examples that we had. Thanks to, for instance, the Open RAN Policy Coalition, thanks to their help together, their member companies are able to organize US 5G industry delegation to Taiwan, both in 2023 and 2024, and with participation from NTIA, along with other important partners to Taiwan's vendor ecosystem. So essentially what our government is trying to do is to lay the foundation. We want to make sure we are putting in resources allowing our vendors to just do what they're best at. So we are able to just continue to fund this, to support this, with the goal that we can just promote Taiwan and basically have Taiwan act as a trusted partner to the telecom supply chain. We'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tiffany. And I think that's what you said is really important and really driving home the importance of not only global research collaboration, but also just really involving industry and hearing from industry on their work. Tom, turn it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Corey. So from our perspective, we came at Open RAN from the angle of supplier diversity and addressing what we saw as a national economic security and resilience risk by the consolidation there. So our approach has been to try and tackle the entire breadth of the TRL spectrum, for want of a better word. So we started off with some early stage R&D in labs, covering everything from power efficient chips through to managing private public networks handovers, to integration with legacy brownfield networks. So we do a bunch of early stage TRL there. Then we have, in the middle, we have Sonic Labs, which is our interoperability lab there, helping to bring together individual components and form end-to-end systems and hopefully kind of get them to a stage where they're performant. And then at the top end, we have live trials and demonstrations. And we've got about a dozen or so in flight at the moment, looking at different use cases for Open RAN, whether those are kind of in stadiums or in tourist hotspots or for urban densification, whatever it may be, trying to find use cases. We think that's maybe something that's missing a little bit at the moment in trying to tip us over the line to adoption, is what are the use cases and why, if I'm an MNO or a neutral host or whoever, would I go with Open RAN rather than the existing offers? And then to top it all off, we have the UK Telecoms Lab as well, which is completely security focused. And we have a lot of security research work going on there and a representative network where pieces of kit can come in and be tested against our telecom security and resilience regime. Next steps for us are thinking about Open RAN. Initially, we think of Open RAN purely from that kind of supplier diversity side, like it was a means to an end. I think as we're moving now more towards 6G, we're thinking, okay, how can Open RAN be actually an enabler of what we're trying to achieve there? By having this multi-vendor integrated ecosystem, that makes it much more kind of natural to then integrate, a non-terrestrial network and move towards a network of networks situation. Or by running on COTS hardware, we can then start thinking, okay, that makes it much easier to integrate AI tools or post-quantum cryptography or whatever it may be into that ecosystem there, rather than when you have a proprietary stack. So we're really excited for kind of what this next phase of work looks for us. I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Tom. And then Matt.
So in terms of our activities, I highlighted a few things in my intro, so I won't kind of go over them at length, but in my haste, I did fail to recognize our priority focus to strengthen collaboration with our key allies and our partners, including those at the table, and through forums like the Global Coalition on Telecommunications. So we're really proud about that work and really interested to see where that goes. And I'll also note that the Government of Canada has been, again, proud to have endorsed or helped to develop a number of policy statements on Open RAN or related issues, including the Prague proposals, the UK's Open RAN principles, and the Statement of Principles for 6G. So very happy to have been able to participate in that work. In terms of our guiding philosophy, the government is committed at our core to the security and resilience of our networks. And that includes by diversifying our supply chains, but also influencing the development of future telecom technologies. So we are interested in a variety of the potential security benefits associated with Open RAN, including increasing the transparency of our networks and ideally supporting threat identification and incident response. And while my team has a specific security and resilience focus, we are still guided by our department's broader economic objectives, notably fostering innovation and competition. And Open RAN is of interest to us because it sits at the intersection of our security and our economic objectives. And we truly do believe that this is a space where there are opportunities both for our larger suppliers, but also for the large number of smaller, specialized Canadian companies that may have previously faced challenges entering our supply chains. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much to all four of you. I think one of the key themes that I picked up in a lot of what you had said, and also just at the core of the Prague proposals on telecommunications supply diversity, is collaboration. And I think that's a heavy focus, and having everyone, industry, government, academia, and other stakeholders working in lockstep on these issues. So I kind of want to hear from each of you, in your opinion, what should like-minded governments prioritize when collaborating on open and interoperable networks and supplier diversity? So what are the key core focuses that you would think that government should start with? And I'll open that up to the floor, so whoever feels free to answer.
Yeah, I can go on that. I mean, we touched on this a little bit yesterday on the GCOP panel, and I'll kind of reiterate what I said there, which was we're doing really good work so far through GCOP and kind of various other fora on the soft side of things. As Matt said, we've got a bunch of issues that we're collaborating on, and we've got joint statements, and we're sending those kind of shared messages to the market. And behind the scenes, we're cooperating and making sure we're aligned on what we're doing as governments. The next stage is the more tangible, harder side of that. And we talked a little bit about standards, and I think we've got a panel on that later. Making sure that we have greater alignment and more influence in standards bodies to shape this in the way that we want it to be shaped, but also on the supply side, making sure that we have our best researchers, our innovators, our SMEs who are working together across broad borders to make sure we're maximizing the value there. And then on the operator side as well, we're seeing kind of already partnerships. We heard from NTT Docomo yesterday, who are working very closely with Vodafone as part of their OREX system. And so I see those operators come together and have a joint front and start to think kind of a little bit more strategically and long term and come together on that as well is a really important way to collaborate, and something that hopefully through GCON and through this international collaboration we can help support as well.
Thank you, Tom.
I'll maybe just quickly jump in on Tom's point, and it's really, for us specifically, is our interest in kind of fostering working level collaboration and opportunities for that. So senior level engagement is great. I mean, it sets our high level objectives, it sets our direction. But when it comes to technical and fast paced topics like Open RAN, it's really in that working level collaboration that can be both more regular and substantive. And speaking from the Canadian perspective, it's been really great for us to forge direct relationships with our counterparts and kind of cut through a lot of, the added process in a government system. So obviously when your engagement is only at that higher level, you may be losing things both going up and going down. And so this is giving us a vehicle to kind of really advance more concrete, substantive work that we're excited about.
I just want to echo what Matt said about the importance of working level collaboration. Using Taiwan as an example, we actually came into this global collaboration from a neutral lab perspective. Okay, so what that means is that we're able to build engagement and relationship with other neutral labs that share the common goals as a government-funded lab in Taiwan to pursue the real openness and to promote our vendor ecosystem. A lot of the times, these collaborations, they fall under a grander framework between governments, but usually it is the working level that get things done. Kind of like how our project office is delegated by the Industrial Development Administration under MOEA, which is equivalent to NTIA, and that's how we're able to foster this relationship. And also with their invitation, we're able to endorse the prior proposals on telecom suppliers diversity during one of the trade missions led by our minister to Washington, D.C. At the end of 2022. So building on that, from our government's approach, having this neutral lab role actually allows us to engage with different government-funded neutral labs around the globe. This allows us to do practical collaboration, to understand each of the regional differences where we could best allocate our resources to basically avoid repetitive, redundant work. We've been hearing a lot about this consistent, repeatable testing efforts that's going on across the different neutral labs around the globe, and we think that is actually the most beneficial to the vendor ecosystem in order to pursue what we're trying to do here. So, to you, Dr. Rondo.
Thank you. Yeah, I liked what Matt said too about some, senior leadership able to provide direction and some guidance, but there's like critical work that needs to be done to actually make that happen. So I've been thinking about this as my colleagues here were talking. Networks are really interesting as technologies. How do you get people excited about them? How do people understand their role and their value? They're intangible. I come from the DoD, so we build F-35s and aircraft carriers, and you can touch those and you can see what they do. Networks, though, they're infrastructure behind the scenes that make everything else work, but it makes it difficult for people to really see that. But then, so as you start to build towards the deployments of networks and the scaling of them out there, and then as people start touching them and do get involved in them and work on them, they tend to inspire innovation. People find new ways to use these systems that they weren't necessarily built for. You need to build it for a purpose, but then people will discover new ways of experimenting with them. And so what's great about networks, wireless networks in this community, this technology area that we're all in, is you get to allow people to go to their instincts of being selfish and what do they want out of these systems. And that's what's driving a lot of the interactions that we have. And I think we heard it from, there's 4 different countries up here, and we all have our own mutual interest in supporting our priorities within our countries. But those priorities meet the international needs of collaboration of allies and partners in order to drive forward the technologies that we're all interested in solving for ourselves, and solving for our countries, and then solving for peace and economic security around the world that we have a huge interest in. So it's a really interesting technology area for us to drive towards that. And the proposals, both them, if we go back to the originals, what I love about that is the supporting democratic values. And that is something where, again, it's a weird thing to say, but that's a selfish drive of a lot of us, is to try to ensure that those are available and that we're promoting those and exporting those around the world. That drives you into working on solutions that allow interoperability, allow collaboration, and foster all that. What I would say here, though, is to kind of take it to that next level of, aside from just saying these, this is good for the world, and promoting these types of ideas. It reminds me of some of the great work that I know Jaysha and Kate and others were hugely involved in, Brian, as far as our work on the joint statement on 6G that came out of the White House, but also our joint statements with the Swedes and with the Finns. And I remember being in the room with this delegation at the Finnish embassy a few years ago, really kind of promoting this democratic values and doubling down on that is a key feature that we want to see happen inside of our future standards and future of 6G. We kind of came out with open, secure, and resilient by design as a little bit more concrete ways of establishing those. But we still looked at each other and said, we all promote our democratic values. Can we define them? So we're starting to try to define those in terms of secure, open, and resilient by design. But then I would then say, can we define resilience? Can we measure resiliency in our networks? So trying to wrap all what I just set up into the package of what do we do next, and I think it's really defining those qualities of those networks that we have something to build towards, and we have something to collaborate on in order so that we can measure and define these next generation systems that meet those needs that have been set up in all these discussions.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So moving on to another key portion of the proposals, it talks about government's role in engaging in good faith with industry, civil society, and other stakeholders to address some of the obstacles that they see in supplier diversification. So for my next question, I want to hear from each panelist on what are some of those obstacles that you have heard from industry, civil society, and others when it comes to supplier diversification, and how can governments continue to address these obstacles? And if there are any examples that you can share where you've seen this in action, please do. Maybe I'll start with you, Matt, and then we'll just move down the line again.
Sure. So one of the recurring obstacles or just topics that we see raised when it comes to considering new suppliers is the question of security. So both the security of the solution, but also the security of the broader supply chain. So this is great because now I can plug some of the great domestic work that myself and some of our other colleagues in other parts of government are doing as, in terms of how do we address that. So my colleagues at the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity are operating a voluntary program called the Telecom Cyber Resilience Program, or TCRP. So the scope of the program is the Mobile Network Threat Service, and this covers standards, architecture, and supply chains. And the program really seeks to provide, leadership to inform and empower our mobile network operators to really give them the tools to ensure that their networks are secure and resilient. And the program provides both threat information and mitigation advice, regardless of supplier. So in that sense, we are not creating any kind of artificial barriers, and we're really ensuring that all of our operators are free to select the supplier of their choice, but that they will all get a similar amount of support when it comes to ensuring their security. I'd be remiss if I did not note the kind of broader legislative initiative that my government is attempting to push through. So that is Bill C-26, an act respecting cybersecurity. I won't go into it in too much detail, but just to say that the bill is right now in our Senate, and fingers crossed, will soon become law. And one of the key elements of that bill is amendments to our Telecommunications Act to create a new security policy objective, but also to provide our government with clear authorities to compel action from telecom sector stakeholders against any threat, again, including those from our supply chains. The bill would also enact a separate piece of legislation, the Critical Cyber Systems Protection Act. This would be a cross-sector reg framework, and it would require designated operators in sectors like telecoms to proactively identify and mitigate their supply chain risks. And I will just finally note that we do work very closely with both our telecom service providers and our digital infrastructure providers through a series of public-private partnerships that we maintain. These have been really successful and great for us. They're trusted partnerships that bring together high-level officials from government and industry. We can create a safe space to have frank conversations, but also to share information. And it also gives us forums to do deep dives, again, based on member interests in specific technology areas or issues. So that's kind of how we are getting at the question of security when it comes to supply chains and supplier diversification.
Thank you, Matt. And I think it's really important to commend the progress that Canada has made in such a short time. We at NTA are always very impressed with how much work the government has been done in such a short time.
I'm just going to say, I hope we don't get jinxed now and we get a snap election, at which point the bill will revert to, step one. So
Way to go, Corey.
I had my fingers crossed the whole time, so.
Yeah, I think security is a huge one, but I will think back to aligning incentives. That's been a huge part of my job here is figuring out incentives from the DoD, incentives from commercial industry, so that we can both be successful and both have some skin in the game. The challenge that we find that we're worried about with security comes from the fact that, again, coming from the position of working for the U.S. Department of Defense, our security requirements tend to be much higher than most people have to worry about. We are under constant attack by our adversaries around the world, and we need to be hyper conscious of that. And it drives us to another level of intention when it comes to what security means and how we define it and how we measure it. And that can be a disincentive from a commercial perspective because we're adding burdens, we're adding barriers and costs and power and energy and people to manage these systems in the secure light that we have. Now, what I've always liked about where 5G is taking us and our current push towards advancing that in the 6G standards is as these new market areas are starting to be realized, and every year I keep hoping that it's going to be the year of the breakthrough of the identification of the killer app that makes 5G worthwhile, that changes the game from just providing enhanced mobile broadband to thinking about these other aspects of these networks and what they can do for us. But we are starting to see advancements in certain new markets. I think the agriculture market is one of the ones that's a driving force right now that I think we're going to see some real inspiration and hopefully some surprise on how these networks affect their ability to do their work. But as we try to figure out what those incentives are and push on them, the hope has been, and the vision of how we're working with this has been that more of these new markets are inherently require more security. And therefore, again, back to we've aligned incentives because more things are going to be dependent on safety, security, privacy, issues that affect people's lives day to day. And these networks are now a critical part of that. And so they need to be taking security more seriously. So I hope that we can see these alignments, but we are going to continue to push on these things. And we in the DoD are going to constantly be kind of upping the ante as far as what matters to us as far as security. So that's going to have to come with things like funding and things like requirements within the military services to drive those forward, to show people that you don't sell to us unless you meet these requirements. So we also have to provide that carrot in order to make sure that you're meeting those needs from us. So there's a lot of moving parts here, and we need to find those avenues for better revenue streams and for better funding and for better alignments there in order to meet those needs of ours. That's where we seem to see a lot of issues.
Thank you, Doctor.
Well, if I may, I want to yield the time to the colleague from UK first, and I'll go last. So,
Yeah, of course. So security points are all totally valid. I go slightly different route with the assignment. And my colleagues back at the Treasury probably won't thank me for saying this, but cash, right? Cash is always one of the big barriers, and we see that on the supply side with kind of Open RAN vendors, not being able to capitalize on the economies of scale that the incumbents have. And while they're trying to scale up, and while Open RAN's still as a child, getting those revenue sources to stay above water and be eventually able to grow into that network. And then on the demand side, in the UK especially, operators are pretty squeezed. Obviously, the macroeconomic environment isn't great. Their OPEX has gone through the roof with the electricity bills. They've had to rip out Huawei, which costs a lot of money. They can't monetize 5G meaningfully at the moment. And we have a very pro-consumer regulatory regime. I think we pay about a third less on average per month than in the US for our mobile contracts. So on both sides, there's real squeeze cash-wise. And then when you bring Open RAN into the equation, you then got to find the additional cost for integration and all that. I think we heard $1 million per partner was a number banded around yesterday. It's an expensive endeavor, and we hope that it will pay off in the long run. And there's a lot of benefits to be accrued from that, but it's a tight time fiscally for everyone, and cash always goes a long way.
here I come. So here I want to offer a more working level perspective when it comes to dealing with the obstacles that we hear either from the industries or from our telecom operators, our vendors, so on and so forth. So from the standpoint of our project office, one of our main mandate is to basically act as a bridge between the government, the policymakers of Taiwan, and also the end users. And here we're referring to the telecom operators or the enterprises who will adopt private networks. So what happens is that we heard from them and know that with the adoption of Open RAN, which is the ultimate goal, sometimes say integration is a key issue. So how we tackle that is to use existing funding and resources that our government has already put in place. For instance, like the testing lab that the government is sponsoring, allowing our vendors to go through testing and then maybe hone their skills as an system integrator down the road, hoping to increase the likelihood of the end users building more trust and confidence in their products. So that's one working level example that I have for you. As for the other one, dealing with the obstacles, sometimes it's just to gather what the vendors or the operators, what they actually need, and consolidate them and provide advice to the policymakers at the end. So what happens is that we notice that there is this gap. We have vendors who are eager to be adopted or to be in conversations with our operators, but sometimes are reluctant. Not just referring to the domestic ones, but sometimes the international ones as well. Where is the gap? How do we fill them? This is actually an ongoing task that we constantly have to deal with. But eventually, what we want to do is to utilize existing resources and to make the best outcome out of it.
Actually, Corey, if I may,
Yeah, please.
another thing that struck me about this is kind of the issue of the workforce and our ability to understand to scale these things, to define the next generation technologies. It's been the core of a few very big companies to do this right. They're finding themselves even at a place where they can't really find the talent that they need to make these systems more efficient, advance them. So we're all trying to push in this, but we really do need to be incentivizing the development of the workforce. And then there's also the CapEx issue that Tom brought up. That is another big thing. But I will say on that one, I think there's some interesting hope that's being generated from an Open RAN approach and from the vendor diversity approach, because it's driving us towards software-based solutions. So the 5G, 6G networks are going to be really interesting because you have the physical need to build radios and bend metal to make antennas and hardware behind them. But a lot of the management of it and the execution of it is more like computational services these days, and more software-defined networking and even software-defined radio. That's going to open up a lot of opportunities for us to go in there and have different approaches to optimization, have different approaches to monitoring and integrating solutions that help us improve our security, improve our energy efficiency. So I'll point to the work that we did with NTIA and the RIC forum earlier this year, where we showed that you can use these XApps and RApps on the RIC to have better energy efficiencies of your networks, to manage spectrum more effectively. And as we're starting to push on those, and again, the openness of these networks allows us to tap into different pieces of it, different layers of it, gives us new approaches to solving some of these critical problems. So that's going to be the game changer. And if we can really take advantage of that, then maybe we stop these, every 5-year cycles, we have to have a new tender and roll out a whole new network, but more upgrade cycles that are operating at the kind of ICT level more so than the traditional telecom level. And that might change some of our OpEx and CapEx dynamics that I think are really holding us back right now from making some of these leaps that are going to drive these new verticals and new markets.
Thank you so much. So I have built-in time for audience Q&A, but I have one more question on my end. So please do think of questions as they come up, and we're happy to pass them over to the panelists. So with the PROG proposals, there is an emphasis on industry-led, but also acknowledging that governments have a role in fostering progress, not only on Open RAN, but supplier diversification. And I think at NTIA, we obviously always like to promote our Wireless Innovation Fund as one method of investment where we're really working on how we can diversify the Open RAN supply chain, but also move Open RAN forward as a technology. So my question is kind of asking each panelist, kind of looking forward, what are some of the key ways that government can continue to help foster that progress towards openness and interoperability within the telecom sector, while also respecting that private sector does play a leadership role in this field? And I will open it up to the panel.
Yeah, I'll go back to some of the work that we've been asked to do from Congress. And my colleague back there, Juan Ramirez, who runs the 5G cross-functional team, they're really taking charge of this one, which is how do we roll out 5G at all military installations? That was the blanket statement. So first off, we have to find what is a military installation and where do we begin? Because we have a huge presence around the world, but that gives us a really useful tool to continue to push these incentives, to create a marketplace for people to deploy. So new opportunities for the telcos for access to base operations and the people that live and work on those facilities. So we're this is creating that new incentive where by saying you work with us, we'll help overcome some of the burdens, pave the way for you to deploy on military installations more effectively than we've allowed you to in the past. That opens up new revenue streams because you have more access to consumers. So while we're doing that, we're also working together to try to say, okay, if these networks exist on military installations, what other DoD level purposes, what other military purposes can we create around them? And so now that's going to drive other innovations and other incentives for commercial industry to build solutions, to build security features into it, integration with public and private networks together securely, and new ideas for just how to use these networks for different purposes. So I think that's it. Is we're trying to work to open up those things to create the incentives while industry is still trying to figure out where that next revenue stream is going to come from.
Thank you.
I'll maybe jump in. A few things come to mind. So obviously we recognize the critical role played by industry in terms of really leading the development of the sector and the evolution of the technologies and ultimately adoption. And we primarily do look to industry to determine benefits and use cases. But I do think that governments can help to advance openness and interoperability in a few ways, and I'll name a few. One is maintaining our support for the industry-led multi-stakeholder processes for standards development. We've seen that process yield, broad benefits of innovation for all players, and I think it's incumbent on us to collectively continue pushing back on any effort to undermine or co-opt those processes to favor either a specific group of actors or a geographic region. We want this to continue, being a benefit to all. Leveraging our convening power as governments to bring together stakeholders, including those that may compete in other realms, but to really kind of work through shared challenges, but also figure out how we can work collectively to advance some opportunities. So I think this event is a perfect example of leveraging that government convening power, and here we have a really great and diverse group of stakeholders. And then finally, again, kind of speaking from the Canadian perspective, and this may be true or not for the other governments, so I won't speak for them, but it's continuing to make links and to educate within our own system to ensure that other teams and other work units are informed and empowered to be aware of all of the domestic and international opportunities that we do have to continue to support openness and interoperability, and that other teams are also examining their own programs, their own initiatives to see how they can join us in kind of advancing these shared objectives. Thanks.
Sure. So I want to kind of touch on kind of the use cases point specifically. If we're kind of saying to an operator or whoever, right, that hey, you can take a proprietary piece of kit or you can take an open RAN piece of kit, even if they're performance parity, you've basically got a trade-off of flexibility for complexity, right? And that's a trade-off that some might want to make and some won't. But if we want Open RAN to be really embedded as the default, especially thinking ahead to 6G, we need to say it needs to be more than just parity. It needs to offer you something else. And obviously kind of there's high hopes on RIC and what apps will do for that. But also we need to think, okay, what are the use cases? networks aren't going to look like they look today for much longer. Like, how can we start to think about the more flexible nature of the beast as a solution to new problems? Whether that's rural connectivity or really dense areas with big peaks and troughs or whatever it may be. And I said that we're funding a bunch of trials looking at that. And I think that's where we need to be looking going forward. It's like, what can Open RAN do for you, rather than can you please adopt Open RAN, Mr. Operator? Trying to switch that around and make it more solution focused, I think, is a really big part of the problem that we're trying to solve.
And in the case of Taiwan, I would like to draw an example from the Industrial Development Administration, which is the agency that delegated this project office to promote open RAN industry in Taiwan. So moving forward, or I should say on a day-to-day basis, what we're always trying to do is to identify the gaps right now that are faced by either our vendor ecosystem or by the end users, and to allocate the existing resources, either policy tools, either funding, so on and so forth, to help bridge that gap. So one particular example will probably be the trials or the proof of concepts that we actually have currently available within Taiwan domestically. As I mentioned, we have a lot of those with enterprise networks, private networks, but not yet so far with one that's actually connected to the public network. So we understood that there is an importance. We need to have one of that as an example within Taiwan. So our vendors could just be tested locally and to hone their skills to know more of the bottlenecks, and then throughout the process, hopefully to build more trust with our operators to facilitate adoption in the near future, hopefully. So what we do is basically to identify the gaps and to see what our government can do. Obviously, most of the heavy lifting will have to be done by the industry. But what the government offers, or at least what the administration offers, is a stepping stone to lay the groundwork. And then this way, we're able to just maximize the outcome and the effort that will be put in by the industry. So.
Actually, it reminds me of another aspect of what we're trying to accomplish here, and where Open RAN and the vendor diversity are playing a role in creating your own opportunities to be successful. And I think you've heard shades of that here. One of the tools that we have in the U.S. government is the Small Business Innovative Research, or SBIR, funds, and those are mandated from our pots of money. That some of it goes into the funds for small businesses. And that's great, because this is a place where small businesses can shine in the telecommunications market. How can I go to Ericsson or Nokia and ask them to make me a special tweak into their system, or a unique version of their implementation? They are behemoths, and their costs are based on running hard and moving in a direction that their roadmap defines. Splitting them off becomes really difficult. But from a small business perspective, we can work with them. We can create new incentives for them to explore their opportunities. And what we've been trying to do is, instead of the traditional way of doing SBIRs in the DoD, which is to fund them to do a very DoD-specific task, create a box that they can hand us, and then we continue to pay them to build out that box, bigger, better, faster, stronger than before. Now what we're trying to do within my office is use the SBIR funds to align with what their commercial interests are in general, but give it a home in the DoD for a DoD or military purpose. So again, we can help offset some of their risk while they continue on a path towards commercial success, and they can do that in various parts of the Open RAN network. So, for instance, we have one that the SBIR RFP, request for proposals, closed a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago or so, on XApps and RApps for security. So we're going to be funding a handful of companies to develop these XApps and RApps, but again, that should then go into the wider industry, the international industry, that may benefit from those types of security applications, so they can see other drivers for revenue streams besides just the model that we're providing through the SBIR funds. So I think that's a pretty exciting way to use government funding, but specifically because Open RAN is now allowing us to do that and use it in new ways.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Tom. So now is the time for questions from the audience. So happy to open the floor to anyone that has questions. Yep, please.
Thanks, everyone. Maybe that's working. Okay. Michael Miller from VTARC. So question for you, Tom. You mentioned that we need to get wide-scale deployment of 5G out to the DoD, which I agree. Because the concern is that if we don't have a baseline, which we don't have now, then when we get to things like 6G, we're not going to be evolving, right? We're going to be deploying all over again, brand new. So I spent 7 years in the Pentagon working for the Secretary of Defense doing rapid acquisition. I understand there's challenges, what do you see as some of the biggest challenges with overcoming that? I mean, ostensibly, the services are going to be the ones that need to actually adopt this and integrate into programs of record. So do they need to see more experiments? Do they need to see that it's got security that meets? I mean, what are those challenges that you're seeing?
Yeah. Tom, I think that was for you.
There's two Tom R's up there.
Doesn't help. So I think the biggest challenges are what you said. The services need to adopt this. So the traditional military services, they're the ones that own programs, and they own the acquisitions at scale for supplying and training and equipping their forces. I'm in the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense, so I work in the Office of the Secretary of Defense. So for us to develop it, we're here to kickstart and to look across the entire military and the DoD structure so that we can kickstart these ideas and then transition to the services. There are challenges, though. The availability and the promise of funding year to year. We can't guarantee that in the president's budget year to year with our integration negotiations with Congress. How are industry folks going to look at us seriously and say that they can rely on us to continue these funding efforts? So that's where this idea that we're trying to align incentives breaks down if there isn't trust on either side because of our funding process. So that's a challenge. The other challenge is what we call requirements, and requirements in DoD speak is a very specific term. We often say big R requirements. That's when the service is put in writing. These are the things that we require to happen in order for us to meet mission needs. So we need to make sure that they are driving those requirements. And as I said, if I hand somebody an F-35, they know what that does. If I hand them a box, they know what that does. I have a colleague that works in quantum sciences. So even though quantum, no one understands, very, very few people understand how the actual science behind it works. At the end of the day, he can deliver a box that does better inertial navigation or better timing. We're delivering networks that people tag into. It's not as tangible. And so the requirements behind it and making sure we're feeding those is a really difficult conversation to have. Especially as we meet the needs of the enterprise at large for the DoD and operational, tactical, military mission capabilities at the edge, where they don't often talk to each other or understand how to piece us together. So those are I think the two biggest things that we're struggling with right now is to create a glide path, but also consistency in our ability to fund and execute these things year to year.
Please.
Good morning, very good morning. I'm audible. So I think I was just listening the conversation. So people say that once you deploy standard, 3GPP standard, because 5G, there was a call that how is security is taken care of. So say that the moment you deploy 5G products as per 3GPP, security is taken care of. That's the first statement. Second, we are saying that supplier or vendor diversification, these are some words I am just testing and validation. So testing means, are you again saying that common criteria certification, is it taking care of your telecom needs? Component supply chain, why I am referring to, because I am aware of that most of the components right now going in ORAN or maybe in the other network are from so-called untrusted geography. Let me, so how can the policy statement, whatever we are making, including the neutral test lab, because test labs is supposed to be neutral only. Once we say, so they are always neutral. So will be taken care of. And more important, my question will be on UAE side, because whatever government can regulate is the telecom service providers, because they are regulated by government. Moments it comes the other part, UAE part, whichever I think we are using, and it has also the equal security vulnerability. So how we can take care of this user equipment side? So I think this is my broader question. And naturally, common criteria certification, are we referring to, or how to ensure secure not only network but entire as a system.
I mean, on the certification and testing point, it's something that we're thinking a lot about, kind of both within the UK and also within GCOD. It's something that we're looking at, and we work very closely with colleagues at TIP and the ORAN Alliance on that. It's been really good to see the collaboration that's been going on between some of the labs, and maybe Tiff, you want to talk about some of that? Put you on the spot.
I'll come back if I have a comment, but not at the moment.
Anything? So, never had a question that I didn't have a dialogue for. I wanted to, so I think, yeah, what Tom said is, I think to the specific question that was asked, yeah, that's what we do have challenges there. We have multiple challenges as well in terms of the development of the user equipment and the end devices that are going to utilize these things. And one of the things that I'm looking at and trying to better understand the trends here is the difference between 4G and 5G, and again, this idea of opening up new markets in 5G has been really challenging, and there's many reasons for that. One of them, though, is the cost of developing that end user equipment and certifying it and getting everything right around it. So if I built a chip that goes into one of these phones, and Apple or Samsung or whoever adopts that, then I know I'm going to sell billions of those chips. So I'm heavily incentivized to create something that I know there's a market for. But some of these new verticals, we don't actually know what those markets, the size of those markets really look like. And if you're building a new chip that needs to be integrated into your end user system, if it's a high-end chip node that's required to get the processing or the energy efficiency, you're talking about $100 million of just prototyping that chip. To take it to market, you're at least 10x, if not 100x more money to drive that into a product that you can take to market. That's a massive investment into a market that you don't know exists. So there's a lot of issues dealing with that. I think another issue that I heard, because I think the word trusted and untrusted it came up, that is a huge challenge for us. And the U.S. has created some policies to prevent the adoption of untrusted vendor hardware in the U.S. Famously, in the 2019 National Defense Authorization Act, Section 889, prevents us from buying hardware from certain countries. That is a blanket statement, and it has caused, it drives different approaches to market shaping around the globe when we do something like that. The problem is when we put restrictions on it, we also need to invest in implementation of alternative solutions. So if I can't buy a camera from China and I have no other US-based camera makers that are near the cost or performance, what have I really done? I've actually set myself back in my ability to create useful technologies. So we have to follow these processes, these up with creation of solutions and innovative solutions that meet the needs that we're cutting ourselves off of. We can't buy Huawei equipment. We don't want our partners and allies and frankly all other countries to be adopting Huawei equipment into their networks. That is a quote good thing, TM. But what do we have as solutions, alternative solutions for them? How do we make sure that they're actually going to be walking away with an idea that they can still build a network that's valuable to them, that's cost effective to them, and have a solution provided to them? We need to follow up these policies with real innovation, and innovation requires resources and funding. So those are other things that I think about when some of these challenges are raised to us for how do we make sure that we're creating these new capabilities, these new markets and new investments.
Thank you. And I'm getting the 3 minutes, so I think we have time for one more quick question.
Timed it just right. I'm Larson Harden, NTIA. So I want to look at the security, but I want to try a counterintuitive view of it for a moment. Obviously, we're talking about policies to drive Open RAN. So if we look at Open RAN, we have new interfaces. And in many cases, those new interfaces can actually exist in the cloud. So the question I've got for you, is there a way to create policies that talk about how to secure the networks with the granularity that now occurs within an Open RAN environment, even back to talking about XApps and RApps, or certainly the RICs in the process. Is that a way, from a policy standpoint, to drive adoption because you're looking for a very deep granularity of security conformance?
Yeah, thanks, Loris. And just a quick one from me on that. I think it's maybe a little bit overstated, the kind of the greater threat exposure with the more interfaces and things like that. Obviously, it is a security risk and something we're all aware of and lots of people are working on. But we're moving towards zero trust as kind of the default position anyway. We want to be able to see what goes on inside our boxes. It's the natural transition that we're going through anyway, and Open RAN is part of that journey. So I think it's maybe a little bit overstated as a problem, and like doesn't necessarily need like an ultra specific policy response to that. It's the way the market's moving anyway.
No, I totally agree. If you look at this from the kind of traditional hardware vendor side of things, classic telecommunications, yeah, they're going to look at that as, oh, that's another interface I need to lock down. You ask people in cloud computing, the core of the internet, the computer science world, they look at that as, yeah, we've been developing solutions for that for decades, and they're getting better every year. And as we're scaling out in that world, if you look at the cloud computing world, the trends of security on that have been incredible, and we now more willingly rely on them because there was incentive from the industry to lock those systems down. We need to be pulling more from there. We need to be learning from those solution spaces. I'm going to finally say it. You've all been waiting for it. AI ML. But it's true. A lot of solutions on the market because the speed that these things are running at and the challenges that we're seeing at scale within the cloud computing industry have driven those solutions towards AI ML to run at the speed of computing, at the speed of cyber. And again, it's not perfect. There's always lessons to learn here, but we really need to start adopting that into our space in order to better take advantage of this and make sure that what Tom just said is absolutely correct, that it's not the challenge, that there are solutions for that.
Rick. So we're going to conclude there. What a perfect answer to stop at. I want to have everyone give a special hand to all our panelists today. And please do seek them out outside of the symposium and pick their brains on a lot of the information they shared today.
Or let us pick your brain.
Or that, yes.
All right, let's give them a big hand. Thank you. That was a great panel. Okay, so we now have a break, and I just had an idea. If folks are amenable, if we did a 15 to 20 minute break instead of a 30-minute break, then we could break a little earlier from lunch and beat the technical people. I already cleared this with Julie. I cleared it with Julie. So anyone opposed? Okay, so let's try to get started around 11. Please make your way back at 11, and we will conclude a little earlier and avoid long lines today. Thank you. We are about to get started. All right, I will introduce Megan McMillan from CLDP, Commercial Law Development Program. She will be moderating this fabulous panel. Over to Megan.
Thank you. Good morning again. I'm really excited for this next panel. We're going to be, the focus is on capacity building initiatives of USAID, USTDA, and the Open RAN Academy, and on financing. Now we have the Japan Bank for International Cooperation joining us as well. And so just to start off with introductions, we have Mary Sloan, who's the Deputy Director of Policy and Program Management at the U.S. Trade and Development Agency. We have Mr. Hiroyuki Nakashima, he's the Resident Executive Officer, the Regional Head of the Americas for the Japan Bank for International Cooperation. We have Sabahat Iqbal, who's our Digital Inclusion Advisor with the U.S. Agency for International Development. And we have Richard Matthias with the Asian Open RAN Academy. And so I'm really excited for this panel because I sort of work in this world of technical assistance, and I'm just in complete admiration of my colleagues for the change and an impact that they're seeing on this ecosystem. And so first, I'd like to start off by just asking the panelists to tell us a little bit more about your organization, how it fits into the ecosystem, and a few examples of the types of support that your organization gives and some of the exciting things that you're seeing. Thank you.
So I'm Sabahat Iqbal, Digital Inclusion Advisor in the Tech Division at USAID. Very broadly, the mandate of the Tech Division at USAID is to help facilitate USAID's two primary goals, which is humanitarian and economic development. My team in particular looks at bridging the digital divide. So that could look like things like affordability of devices, affordability of data plans, to relevance of the content online for our target beneficiaries, but then also, of course, fundamentally, the infrastructure required to facilitate access to the internet. And we have several initiatives for promoting expansion of connectivity into underserved areas. For the ORAN specifically, we have funded workforce development, which I think Richard will talk about a little bit more, but also pilots and field trials, as well as commissioned a couple of business cases to help define the pitch that needs to be made to potential partners and funders and investors for ORAN deployment. So I'll just stop there for now.
Okay, thank you. Hi, I'm Richard Matias. I'm the Technical Director of Asia Open Academy, and I'm also one of the course co-creator in the Academy, which covers the RAN, 5G, and Open RAN topics. So the Asia Open Academy is an activity co-created with the USAID Fund under the Biden administration's Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, or the IPEF. So the Academy is based in the Philippines, but will ultimately serve the entire Indo-Pacific region. It is an alliance of academic, government, and industry stakeholders in the Philippines and beyond. And the Asia Open Academy is indeed one of the major driving forces in the workforce development for Open RAN in the region. And our comprehensive training programs, including webinars, certifications, and continuing professional development, or the CPD activities, equip telecom professionals with the skills and knowledge to drive Open RAN deployments. And our efforts have sparked interest and momentum as well among the key players in the telecom industry, including significant operators like Globe, Smart, and even vendors. And by training engineers and providing them with the tools to understand and implement Open RAN technology, we directly contribute to accelerating the Open RAN adoption.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mary Sloan. I'm Deputy Director of Policy and Program Management at the U.S. Trade and Development Agency. USTDA is a foreign assistance agency that works alongside and in support of U.S. industry to further infrastructure development in emerging economies. We work across a number of sectors, including the digital infrastructure sector, and have funded things ranging from cloud data center expansions to Open RAN pilots. We fund activities through grant funding. So we fund project preparation. We can fund things like feasibility studies, technical assistance, and pilot projects, and are doing a number of those related to Open RAN around the globe. And we come at the early stage of projects. So we're at the project planning stage where we're with the goal of structuring projects so that they can attract financing to be implemented and sustained. And so our work is very critical at those planning stages. So we're doing a lot, as I noted, and I can go into more detail later, but we are looking to do more. So looking forward to hearing from folks. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Hiroyuki Nakashima. I am a resident executive officer of the Japan Bank for International Cooperation based in New York. Thank you very much for inviting us to this very exciting event today. JBIC is the 100% owned by the Japanese government, and we are basically supporting the Japanese companies' businesses in the overseas market, such as the exporting to equipment to the overseas market, and also we are supporting the Japanese companies' investment in the overseas market. For specifically in the telecommunication sector, we had provided support for the supplying the undersea cables or the investment in the data centers by the Japanese industries. And talking about the open run sectors, I'm afraid we haven't provided a loan yet, but I want to introduce one thing that brought us more flexibility to the financing in the sectors or run. And it was last April, JBIC Act, JBIC law was amended, which allows us to support to the not only the Japanese companies, but also the foreign entities, which is going to introduce the open loan system in the market. It was just one condition to apply this financing to the foreign entity, which is that we need to request by the Japanese company to support the foreign company. So I want to touch upon this more in detail later. I'm very happy to discuss with all of my colleagues. Thank you.
So on the previous panel, workforce development was raised as a very important issue. In the transition to Open RAN, companies are going to need consider automating their systems, hiring new engineering talent pools, and taking on an enhanced integration role. So I'd like to ask Mr. Matthias to tell us more about the Asia Open RAN Academy. How are recent graduates contributing to the development of Open RAN systems? And what do you see as some of the initial outcomes of the Academy?
Okay. So since the inception of the Asia Open Academy, so it has made significant strides establishing a solid foundation for the future impact in the telecom industry. So, for example, in the increased advocacy and awareness domain, so through these various outreach activities like the public lectures that we create and the webinars and the courses that we offer to different entities like universities, professionals, or even industry players. So it has significantly raised the awareness of Open RAN benefits and influencing the adopting of Open RAN and interoperable network solutions. So the Academy has reached from last year, from 2022 to 2023, of around 15,000 participants. That is coming from 33 countries. So those are our participants in the webinars and in the seminars and also in the courses. And expanded to over 9,000 participants in the year 2024 for 52 countries. So this broad engagement demonstrates the Academy's role in shaping the Open RAN education globally. So we have different programs that we have developed. So in each audience or segment, for example, for student and general audience, we conduct what we call a Pulse or the public lecture series. So this is where we are discussing Open RAN on a higher level. So the concepts are easy to digest, even for students and for general audience. And then we have a segment for teachers and professors. So these are important because they are the one who will build the minds of the students in the universities. So we call the program as Faculty Development Program or FDP. So where this, the course creators are meticulously guide them in understanding the technology and how to teach it effectively at their respective universities. So we actively promote the inclusion of Open RAN topics as well in the existing curriculum in the university. But in the Philippines, it's very difficult to change the curriculum. If you look at the existing curriculum right now and match it with the current technology that we have, the curriculum is based on the 2G system. So it is very essential that we need to incorporate or we need to upgrade the existing curriculum based on what we are having in the Open Academy. So what we did is that we check the current curriculum right now, and then we match the existing courses. and then we try to inject slowly the topics in each curriculum. And we have provided also, some universities also use those courses as an elective. So meaning it's a special course program for each college student or a graduating student. So that is for the faculty. And then we also have what we call the capacity building and certifications. So these are designed for engineers in the Philippines, particularly electronics engineers. So these are the ECEs. So we call it the Continuing Professional Development, or the CPD, where the participants can earn certificates and CPD points required for renewing their license in the Philippines. And this is done in partnership with the Institute of Electronics Engineers of the Philippines, or the ISEP, and the Department of Information and Information Technology and DICT, and which are applied through the Professional Regulatory Commission, or PRC. So meaning we are bridging these two entities or the agencies where the professional and the government are working together. So we are in the middle, providing the courses. And also we have this, aside from the collaborations with the government, we have industry collaborations as well. For example, our learning platform is hosted in the Rakuten Symphony Learning Hub. So all the courses are located in the Rakuten Symphony Hub because during the inception of the academy, Rakuten has volunteered to host all the courses. And one of the board of director in the academy is from Rakuten Symphony. And then we also have collaboration with Sailor Academy, which provided additional computer science courses and relevant programming and coding courses. And currently, right now, we have 14 university partners, 3 government institutions, and 7 international partners. And last August of this year, so we had the opportunity to participate in the comprehensive training in the RAN Intelligent Controller at the Singapore University of Technology and Design. So they hosted it in their Future Communications Research and Development Program Lab, or the FCC Lab, together with Viavi Solutions, which gave way to have a more impactful development and upgrade in the domain of RAN Intelligent Controller course. So we have worked with them to upgrade our existing RAN Intelligent Controller course. So we will now incorporate the hands-on training with the existing theoretical concepts of the RAN Intelligent Controller. And in terms of the contributions that we have created, so we have seen active participation from engineers working at a significant operators such as Globe, Smart, and even vendors, as I mentioned a while ago, in our webinars and training programs. So the participation indicates operators' growing momentum and preparation for Open RAN adoption. So before these sessions, there was limited movement in the Open RAN domain in the Philippines. However, following our webinars and trainings, numerous engineers, we have observed increased traction and involvement from key industry players. So these activities are helping to accelerate the current operators' transition to Open RAN.
Richard, as you're describing these courses, the collaboration with Viavi, with Rakuten, I could imagine there are policymakers that are in the audience considering, we need this. What are the opportunities for collaboration with the Asian Open RAN Academy, and what lessons learned and guidance would you give to other policymakers looking to set up something similar?
Okay, so partnering with the academy fosters or provide a lot of opportunities, especially for governments. So first is that we can have a curriculum co-development. So that means the industry player and the academy can have a collaboration in designing courses that can contribute to that can contribute or would have a content that aligns with the industry standards, ensuring the relevance and practical applications. So in that way, the existing course of IORA or Asia Open Academy can be upgraded based on the industry demand if we are collaborating with each other. We can also have joint R&D projects, and then they can also have access to the talent, particularly for operators. So operators can just look up our list of trainees, and then they can contact them and then have an interview if they are fit for the requirement of whatever project that they have. And then, of course, in the Asia Open Academy, it's not only about technical. We also have courses on the policy and advocacy. We can collaborate on the policy and advocacy efforts to promote open adoption and influence telecommunications policy.
Okay, wonderful. Yes.
Can I just add a couple more things? As far as like others engaging with the Asia Open RAN Academy, there's also follow-on funding for an interoperability lab that AORA is going to be involved in, and that'll help bring practical experience for their students, but also to an opportunity to engage with industry and add to the vendor interoperability knowledge base. So that's just another way for deeper engagement. And then also in the future, USAID is planning to, thanks to the demonstrated success of the Asia Open RAN Academy, there is interest at USAID as well as other agencies to develop an additional between 5 to 7 academies around the world. So we will very much be looking to engage even beyond Asia and looking to take some of the lessons learned and successes of Asia Open RAN Academy globally.
And Samahat, while we're with you, tell us about other parts of the ecosystem that USAID helps with. This workforce development piece is really critical, but I know that you're working on other areas. Tell us about some of the challenges and the successes that you've seen in helping to support the overall ecosystem.
Yeah, so besides workforce development, I think I mentioned at the top, is USAID is also involved in field trials and commissioning business cases to help understand and define what would be needed in order to actually deploy ORAN networks. So currently in the DRC, we have a pilot running with an engagement with one of the key operators in the DRC. Their customer is in the energy sector, and it so far has reached an additional 120,000 users. So we view that as a key success. Another initiative that we just wrapped up was in Brazil, and that was pilot, but the larger part of it was to build on that pilot to develop the business case that would be needed to help us understand who we can approach for funding and who we should engage with as partners in a national scale-up of the pilot. And very briefly, the pilot itself is an end-to-end health tech solution. So what that means is that there's a health platform through which health services are delivered to underserved areas and rural and remote areas. And then aside from the health platform, obviously we need medical devices, personnel, and then fundamentally connectivity, the connectivity layer. And that's where USAID came in. For that, the connectivity stack can include ORAN, but doesn't exclude traditional things like MNO subscription. And for a national scale-up of a health platform like that, we would have to have a mix of all of these solutions. One of the things we learned, even within the decision of whether to deploy ORAN or how much to rely on ORAN networks, is you can have a dedicated ORAN or you can have a shared ORAN, and obviously shared is far more cheaper. So to the extent that we want to mitigate the cost of deploying ORAN, we want to maximize the use of shared ORAN as much as possible. But then what that means is that you cannot always just deploy in the most remote and rural areas. You have to figure out a way to generate more demand in those areas. And that's kind of where the role of government comes in to incentivize other organizations or users in that area beyond just the clinics delivering health services to maybe subsidize their use of internet to help generate that demand that would then justify at least a shared ORAN site deployment. So those are the couple of connectivity initiatives that USA has been involved in.
And I think I heard my colleague speak about this in our pre-symposium workshop. You looked at, and this is regular for rural deployments with type of universal service fund type that would require that type of support. But he said that you look to the cost of what it would take to send the health professionals to the field, and that the hospital was looking at it from that perspective because the telehealth solved that problem. Could you tell us a little bit more about that in terms of?
Yeah, so the cost breakdown between for an initiative like this, personnel is far and away the largest cost. I think it was about 85% of the total cost. So that's something that in the Brazil case, one of the ways that we tried to ensure a sustainable revenue was to look at their universal healthcare program. So for that, we knew that there would be a sustained demand in the long term, and that would help to sort of defray some of the costs related to personnel. Another way we looked at it was the partners that we were engaging with. So in this case, it was one of the key partners was the largest public health sector hospital in Brazil, which is based in Sao Paulo. Not only for their ability to provide some of the personnel, but also the fact that they are running their own innovation center. So they were very interested in the ways in technology can facilitate health services to underserved communities. And so they had already had that mindset of leveraging new and emerging technologies for an initiative like this. So the key partners were very important to us.
Thank you for that. I know it's a super exciting initiative, and a number of countries will be looking at it, just given the importance of trying to provide telehealth to rural areas in developing countries. So let's switch to the deal side also. So I'm going to ask Director Sloan if she could tell us a little bit more about the USTDA tools and some of the challenges that you've seen in some of the Open RAN deals specifically, and how USTDA helps bridge the gap and gets companies to the deal stage.
Absolutely. So as I noted, we provide grant funding, so we come in at the project preparation stage. I'll just highlight one example that I think will illustrate the type of work that we do. So last year, we funded technical assistance to the Palau National Communications Corporation to support modernization of their telecommunications mobile network. And this included three major components: modernizing the network, expanding connectivity, and then supporting a plan for the rollout of 5G across Palau. And so modernization of the network, the technical assistance is looking at removing and replacing the network, deploying the core network, and then deploying a limited number of Open RAN sites as well. And then also, it also includes training on Open RAN technologies and operations, procurement preparation, the development of financial models to assess the investment requirements that are needed to fund the next stage, which is the implementation stage of the project. And then also the technical assistance is providing a plan for how to roll out 5G across the nation. And what's unique about this activity, and not necessarily unique because we strive to do this with all of our activities, but this is actually a really great example of both the coordination within the U.S. government and then also with our foreign partners, specifically the Quad. So USTDA received transfer funding from State Department to fund this activity. And then we coordinated closely with Quad members to help accelerate implementation of this activity. And I think as of July of this year, Palau PNCC has already raised like 3/4 of the capital requirements needed to implement the project from a number of funding sources, including Australia. And I know there's been discussions with JBIC about the activity as well. So
it really just highlights an example of a tool that we have to support Open RAN deployments, but then also the engagement we strive to do with our U.S. government colleagues and then foreign partners. And I think that's when that exists, it helps set projects up for success. And this is a great example of that.
Wonderful. Do you have other examples from around the world that you might provide? Are there any brownfield examples, or are there other challenges that you could describe for us that for within the Open RAN ecosystem that USTDA is working on?
Sure. So we are working also in Turkey to support an Open RAN pilot. It's not a brownfield, or it is a brownfield activity, actually. So we're working with Parallel Wireless and one of Turkey's mobile network operators to deploy an Open RAN pilot both in the lab and in the field. It's a smaller deployment, but that's nearing completion. We're also we funded an activity in Nigeria a few years ago that's completed and looking to move to the next stage where we're looking at Open RAN deployment in underserved areas. So it's sort of like a mix of working in dense populated areas and then also trying to utilize Open RAN to reach areas that have traditionally been underserved. And yeah, so I think the challenges, financing is always a challenge. Funding pilots is a challenge for a lot of mobile network operators, or they expect vendors to provide that funding. So that's where USTDA can come in and support vendors to showcase their solutions to mobile network operators. And that's what we're doing in a number of these activities. And then we build in tasks into our work to assess the financing, to develop financial models so that when financiers like USXM, JBIC, or others are ready to then move forward with the activity, they have all the information that they need to make it easier to then move to that next stage and finance the activity. And then we also work to build strong relationships with entities like JBIC and within our own U.S. government to ensure that we're sharing pipelines and connecting our grantees with potential financiers or other forms of support after our support is completed.
Wonderful, thank you. So we'll move to the financing side. Mr. Nakashima, could you tell us a little bit about how you select projects and given the need for competitive financing to support project implementation, I'm sure this is going to be of keenest interest to some of the companies and policymakers that are here. You had mentioned that you look to partner with a Japanese company as a part of it. Are there other things that you look to, and are there target areas for JBIC?
Sure. Okay. Thank you very much for asking a very important question to me. First, when I recall the last year's discussion in Japan when our act was amended, I think the 3 points I recall, and the first one is I think it's a time now that we tackle with more to expand the open RAN system in the global market. Otherwise, the legacy system is now oligopolized in the market. So we don't want to miss the timing to the more resilience of the supply chain by the trusted vendors, which will support, of course, the Japanese and also the like-minded countries of vendors' businesses. And second point is that we have to do the accountability to the Japanese people, Japanese government, in order to broaden our businesses. And on that point, the open RAN system is not only for the recipient country itself, but also it will broaden the business opportunity for the global businesses, including Japan. And it will, more business friendly and also very efficient businesses opportunities that will bring to the businesses in the market. And the third, and not last, but most maybe the important point is how we can reduce the financing cost introduction of the open RAN system. So in that context, maybe we, JBIC, is your finance loan provider or the guarantee provider. So we are maybe a player in the business implementation stage of the open run system. And then maybe we are discussing with the USTDA or the USAID or other partners of the other government entities. We don't have the function of the technical assistance. So we want to collaborate with other partners. So the early stage, POC stage or the testing stage, we want to collaborate with other partners, financial functions. And then when we come to the implementation stage, JBIC together with other financial institutions such as the US DFC or US Exim Bank or other financial institutions in the European market and also other like-minded countries, we want to collaborate each other. So JBIC has been discussing with the Japanese government to think about this policy, and also we are discussing with the Japanese companies, telecommunication companies, and also the Japanese vendor companies, which want to promote the open line businesses. So that is a basic background over how we get the businesses information, and then we are discussing with our alliance partners, either like a USTDA or DFC, AID, and also we are talking with private financial institutions as well. Private finance is very important to expand the financing volumes in the case of the implementation stage. So JBIC, as a government financial institution, we want to mobilize a private fund to this open loan system.
Wonderful. And could you provide us with sort of examples of how you've worked in that complementary way with other organizations and seen success in the field for financing for Open RAN deployments?
Yes, okay. I'll give you some examples. For example, we have been very much deeply involved in the dialogue. It's a bilateral dialogue of the multilateral dialogue. For example, last February, we participated in US-Japan dialogue on the digital economy. It is called the Dialogue on Digital Economy. And also, we participated in April with a roundtable of the Open RAN hosted by USAID. And then we had a very good discussion how we can collaborate each other and how we can tackle, and then at the end of the day, how we can reduce the financing cost through the all Open RAN system investments.
Okay, wonderful. And I know that the audience is probably thinking that, like, how do we access this support? Is there what are the best ways for collaboration, do you think, or for them to try and contact USTDA or JBIC or USAID or the Open RAN Academy? I think you spoke to that already a little bit, Richard. But let us know what are the opportunities for collaboration and how can they reach out?
I can start. So the best way to reach out is really to email me or another one of my colleagues that covers the region that you're in. I'll just go over a few sort of requirements that we have. Typically for our grant funding, there's no prescribed minimum or maximum, but it typically ranges between $500,000 to $1.5 million, $2 million. So there's smaller grant amounts for those project preparation activities. We can work with both the public and the private sector in a foreign market. We only work in low and middle income countries. And this is per the World Bank income classification, country income classification. And then all of our projects, they must be local priorities. So we strive to be responsive to our foreign partners. So we want to ensure that we're not proposing project ideas, but that they're coming to us and they're in fact local priorities. So that's very important for us. And then for any of the work that we're doing, if we're funding a pilot project, it's a U.S. company that's carrying out the work, or if it's a feasibility study, a U.S. company carries out that feasibility study. It's not tied, so after the work is completed, there's no requirement that the U.S. company be involved in the follow-on implementation. That, of course, is our hope, but it's not a requirement. But again, if there are project ideas or interest in working with USTDA, the best way is to reach out. You can find a list of contacts on our website. You can come up to me and I'll share information. And typically we just look for a short overview of what it is that you're proposing, and then we'll go from there and have more detailed discussions about the actual evaluation process and next steps. But reaching out, a cold call, that's all fine with us. Thanks.
Yes. So for JBIC, I'm very happy to talk with you here. Or we have the 18 overseas offices in globally, so you can access to your JBIC representative office near to you. There is no actually limit of the upper limit or down limit of the JBIC financing amount. And also we can provide to the year not only the developing countries, but we can finance to the developed countries as well. And also we can provide financing to the public company or the private company as well. But just one condition is, as I mentioned at the first, when we provide financing to the foreign entity, not Japanese entity, in the open run system, we need to be requested by the Japanese entity. So it needs to be recommended to talk with the Japanese potential partners as a vendor or the telecommunication company, the Japanese telecommunication company, which will be talking with us when we extend loan to the foreign entity.
Similarly for USAID, cold call, cold email to me or my team lead, Tom Kautsky, who's sitting somewhere in the back over there, is perfectly fine. The workforce development, the academy expansion is in the beginning phases, so this is an excellent time to engage with us. And the pilots and field trials is something we're always looking for opportunities to build on our knowledge base of what it takes, the cost benchmarks and performance benchmarks of ORAN deployments. So that's kind of an open call. Please feel free to reach out. And if I could just mention sort of the just ORAN specific things that USAID is also involved in that I think others in the room might be interested in. We have bilateral programs. The primary one is Beacon in the Philippines. So that is a project that looks at promoting connectivity in the Philippines. It's agnostic on the solution, but it obviously opens the door to engage with regulators and other stakeholders in the Philippines on the possibilities of ORAN. And similarly, we have bilateral programs in the Pacific Islands as well as in Ukraine. On the public policy side, we have a program called the Pro-ICT, which is giving advice to governments on policy and regulations. As a couple of recent examples, we advise El Salvador on their 5G rules, Colombia on their 5G auction. So if anyone is interested in that sort of initiative, please reach out. And then finally, we have a blended finance initiative, whose goal is to help smaller ISPs raise capital for equipment purchase. And alongside that, we do also offer technical assistance, or we will also offer technical assistance. We're looking to expand that particular initiative significantly in the coming year. And the name of that initiative is the Connect 1 Billion Fund. So if you are interested in that, please also reach out and I can connect you with the right people. Thank you.
Okay. So do we have questions from the audience for the panel members? There's a mic in the middle if you'd like to stand up and ask a question.
Before the question.
Kate?
Kate has a question.
Good.
Sorry, that was a long trek. Thank you guys so much for being on this panel. Super interesting. I guess my question would be, generally, have you all worked with other country governments to support kind of capacity building initiatives, and/or if not, how do you all work together to bring together the different resources that y'all have just laid out to bear when you're looking at kind of cooperating internationally on capacity building, specifically related to kind of promoting telecom supplier diversity and an open, secure, interoperable, and reliable telecommunications ecosystem more broadly?
Let me start.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kate. Yeah, in the case of Open Asia Open Academy, so we have worked with the government. We have some projects that or activities with them. For example, for the DICT, as I mentioned earlier, so we have the CPD activities. So we're working with them on the CPD activities. So we are training the engineers of the Philippines to have this CPD points, and we are incorporating the topics on Asia, on Open RAN. Next is there is another entity in the government that is part in the Mindanao area. They call themselves BARM, the Bangsamoro Islamic area. So they have contacted Asia Open Academy to have a more focused training on spectrum management and radio access network and Open RAN. So they want to be trained, their engineers and the entire team of the Bangsamoro government. So we have conducted that last month, last August. So we have conducted 5 working days of training with them, and also for areas like DOH. So we have one of the board of director in the Asia Open Academy is a doctor. So they are deploying doctors to the barrios. So these are the doctors that are deployed in far-flung areas in the Philippines. Primary challenge is connectivity. So they are carrying this kind of IoT device. They call it the RX box. So this RX box has the capability of ultrasound and taking some basic medical tests. But the main challenge is to transmit that results going back to the center of the Philippines, Manila, or the PGH, Philippine General Hospital. So we have helped them on assessing the area to have to provide connectivity. What we did was we coordinated with USAID, and then USAID has tapped one of the experts in Virginia Tech, that is Dr. Aloisio, and he was very kind to go in the Philippines and help us do the assessment of that area and provided recommendations on what type of Open RAN or solutions that we could provide in that particular area to have connectivity in terms of medical use case.
Yeah, engaging with the government is critical for the pilots and field trials that we were looking at. And I think to kind of echo what Richard is saying, in Brazil, we saw it as very important to partner with, obviously, the appropriate ministries and policymakers. But since we were looking at the health sector, to partner with that public sector hospital was far and away probably the most important thing that we could have done for that initiative and pilot. So.
Mm-hmm. And then I'll just add, in all of our activities, we try to ensure that there is the appropriate capacity building built in. So for the Palau example that I provided earlier, there's training being provided to PNCC to ensure that they have the appropriate training on the Open RAN technologies and operation of them. So we don't do expansive capacity building efforts, but it's really embedded within on a much smaller scale within our activities.
We are also approached by the foreign government and also the foreign telecommunication company for our potential financing. And we're just continuing discussion on that point. And then we share some of the points with our friends with the USTDA or USAID for the collaboration financing, and then propose back again to the foreign governments or foreign telecommunication company. That is what we are doing now. Thank you.
I see we have a question from James.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Megan. My name is James from Kenya. So my question probably goes to USAID, USTDA, and JPIC. I just wanted to find out what is your appetite for funding startups in the areas of, let's say, capacity building? And secondly, do you also give support to the startups in terms of policy within the regions and countries where they operate? Thank you.
Yeah, excellent question. So I'll just really reiterate quickly the Blended Finance Initiative, which is for startups, smaller ISPs. That's not ORAN specific. Within the academies themselves, there is going to be a chunk of funding set aside for exactly this sort of thing to identify startups that can help sort of promote the ORAN ecosystem. And we'll be putting out a wide net for that. Ideally, the idea is that the students that are going through the academies would then have the capacity and the network to be able to start some kind of initiative within the ORAN ecosystem. But that is a chunk of funding that we've set aside specifically for startups. And there will be at least 2 academies in the Africa region. Mm-hmm.
We don't specifically fund startups, but we have worked with smaller ISPs to support their infrastructure priorities, so we can do things like that. So if a startup is looking to build out infrastructure and has a specific project where they need technical assistance for that, we can engage and see if that's something that aligns with our criteria.
Yeah. In JBIC, I want to tell you one very unique operation for supporting the startup companies. JBIC, by utilizing our subsidiary, we launched VC fund in the Nordic and Baltic region in Europe and also Central and Eastern European countries, which we invest into the startup company in that region. And then we invite the Japanese blue chip company as a limited partner to the fund, and then we are making a strategic alliance between Japanese blue chip company together with investee company in that region. But I'm afraid we don't have the fund in the African region yet, so maybe it is our next target. Yeah, hopefully. Thank you.
Are there other questions? Well, I'd like to ask also, Mr. Nakashima, do you have other examples of unique deals that JBIC has funded? And are there any that you're really excited about, deals that you see really resulting in big Open RAN deployments or successes for Japanese companies?
Right. Thank you very much for showing my slide. Yeah, this is our past example of a track record in the ICT sectors. I can't say which was the most exciting, but traditionally, we were supporting Japanese companies' businesses in the overseas market, and traditionally we are supporting undersea cable or telecommunication cables equipment export from Japan to overseas market, such as the Uzbekistan's case and also Angola's case as well. But recently, we receiving more, request for the financing in the data center project in the United States or in the European market and also Asian countries. So I think the more demand is growing in the data areas, and hopefully we are going to have the next opportunity for financing the Open RAN system project in the market. Thank you.
Wonderful. Does anyone have any questions about some of the deals that are on this slide?
Actually, the Palau case was the collaboration with USAID, yeah, yes. And also Australian partner. Yeah.
It's really fantastic to see the impact that JBIC has had. Okay, so I think are there any further questions for our panel? We might be able to beat them at lunch ahead of time. Okay, let's give our panelists a round of applause.